Dude, the live was awesome. It was good.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, we do it every Saturday. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's
Even
dedication, man.
even when we're yeah, I've been doing it since March of 2020. When the pandemic hit,
Hmm.
I just kind of wanted a place to start talking about things,
Yeah,
and I didn't really know it would catch on. Just thought it'd be just a few people, and then it just kind of became a there for a while. When it hit its peak, it was over like almost 400 people watching. It was cool.
damn.
It's kind of
Yeah.
slowed down, right? Everything's open. Nobody
Oh,
needs to
big
sit
time,
around and
dude. Even the
listen.
same thing with podcasting too. It's I think, because this is kind of summertime. People are out and about, driving, whatever it may be. Like, it's the last thing on their mind. It's like I'm on vacation mode. I want to go out. I've been stuck at home, this and that. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I
yeah.
think it's
But
it's
you know what I've always thought about though, as someone that like helps other podcasters, and I frequently speak about like podcasting. Downloads is always like a big thing that people bring up and really focus on, which is
Mhm.
which is all fine and dandy. Let's be real, downloads are extremely important. You kind of get that sense of like a lot of people use it as a benchmark for success, and I get it. But I think a good way to look at it is whether you get 50, 100, 200, whatever it may be, however many downloads or listeners, or especially on a live. I think if you're able to even pull in those type of numbers in a live, that's saying a lot, right? Like, imagine 100 or 200 people in a room watching you talk, or giving, like, watching you record or giving your spiel. Like, that'd be incredible, right? Like, I did
Yeah,
I did those Heroes Con panel, and like there might have been, I think a safe bet was like 50, around 30, 50. But that's a big deal. Like, that's a significant amount of people to have in one room and give your undivided attention for, whatever it may be, an hour. It's different ways of viewing, like, the success in this thing we call YouTube and podcasting.
I think I think it really takes a lot, to
Big
keep
time.
doing it, and
Big time.
it is sometimes discouraging when numbers drop, and
Hmm.
because that affects you money wise, right? Especially if you
Yep.
I do this for a living, so of course I have to always keep up with like numbers and seeing what's going on, what's working, what isn't.
Hmm.
And then if I take a step back and then realize, like I think you said it, like how do you measure success? If I take a step back and look at all the things that I've accomplished, like a 15-year-old Omar would have been really damn proud of me.
Well, you know what?
So
I feel you on that. A younger me, when I was working at the shop, would never believe like the amount of, people I've just been able to talk to. Like, it's definitely like a childhood kind of, not even just a childhood dream, but like a dream come true.
yeah, absolutely. Like things like this. I had a podcast in 2000, was it 2005 to 2008.
Hmm.
But even then, like we didn't have these things 20 years ago. Like when we were kids, right? Like when we were kids, or I was working at the comic book shop,
Hmm.
like telling like the thought of like people listening to me and listening to my suggestions, like just wouldn't even like how do you make money from that? Like it doesn't make sense. What are you talking
Yeah, I've
about?
got it. I started podcasting in 2012, like very
Mhm.
early into podcasting. So it was like, very limited places you could go listen to podcasts. And there was like, very small handful of people that actually knew what podcasting was, that was like listening on a regular basis.
Mhm.
So to see like this kind of grow and change, not only just the medium and the industry of podcasting grow and really like change and get big. I still have friends that are like, wait, you I had friends that were like, before podcasting got huge, that were like flabbergasted that you tell me you spend every Sunday, 1 to maybe 3 o'clock, 2 hours every Sunday religiously doing this thing, just talking into microphones. And and back then I didn't really know like metrics like that. I wasn't sure how many people were listening because it wasn't that available. And they thought I was crazy. Like, you spend Sundays doing that, like the day before work, your last weekend doing that? What are you, a madman? Like, think of all the things you're missing out on. But it was like, nah, man, this is fun. Like, this is fun.
I'm with you. I,
Yep.
I'm the exact same way when it comes to these things. Like every like my brother, I remember he was like, "You give up your Saturdays every Saturday, yeah, and
Yeah.
every Saturday for the last since March." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's not that bad because you know what? Like for me, it's like talking
Think
to
of it.
friends."
Exactly. Think about what I'm talking about. It's like I'm talking
Right.
about like some of the funnest things like you could read and like a fun hobby. Like it's not pain. It's not like pulling teeth. I could do this, even if I wasn't behind the mic, I'd be doing this.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think like even at the most and I mean it is. So by the way, are we recording? Do you want to I didn't
Look,
know if
this
you
is this is what I call the warm up icebreaker. I always record these because I think people enjoy like the more candid kind of, hey, they're just talking and getting warmed up. So yeah,
Oh,
I am
okay.
recording this, and when I hopped on the Zoom, or I'm sorry, on the live. So yeah, we are recording video, and here's what I do. I normally throw the behind the scenes recording up
Hmm.
on YouTube, so people could just see how the sausage is made. They could see us,
Oh,
like
okay.
chatting, talking. The
Yeah.
finished, polished product is always the podcast. So I lean more towards like the podcast
Yeah.
episode being like production wise. But I always put up the behind the scenes because people kind of like sometimes just the rawness of like, oh, look at them, whatever, mess up, or oh, well, look at this rabbit hole that they went down that didn't show up on the podcast.
No, okay, nice. I like that.
Yeah, double
There
the
you go.
content, double. You always, how it is. Like you got to find ways to repurpose like content a lot, right?
Oof. Yeah, and I'm still finding that fine line of like how exactly to do that.
Yeah.
That's still kind of an issue.
But yeah, man.
Yeah.
For this one, for this interview, I kind of want to cover like, see the benefit of you coming on this episode will be that you particularly don't have like a time sensitive thing that you're pitching, or like you don't have a project coming out next month and you got to get
Mhm.
the PR machine going. So this will be a lot more relaxed, and I can have a lot more fun just kind of like picking your brain about your favorite titles, and really kind of dive into like just two comic book nerds having a good time chatting.
Okay.
So it'll be relaxed. We'll definitely talk about how you got the YouTube channel started. As a fellow content creator, I want to hear like your thoughts on some of the challenges and obstacles. But for the most part, man, these aren't going to be like any crazy inside baseball or gotcha question journalism.
I got you. I got you.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
all right. Well, if you're ready, man, I'll go ahead and officially get us warmed up. With this being the behind the scenes recording of, obviously people aren't going to hear the opening intro and the pitch and all that. So I'll just start right here. Let me take a swig. All right. Here we go. Let me do a little time marker. 16 minutes in. All right. With all of that out of the way, we can get into the main event and talk about comics with our esteemed guest today, Shortbox Nation and mentees joining us from the near mint condition community. Let's warmly welcome to the podcast a champion for collected editions and one of the most positive voices in the comic community there is. Here's the Uncanny Omar. What up, Omar? How you doing, buddy?
I wasn't expecting all those people cheering. That was completely unexpected. Thank you so much. I wish I had every of my videos introduced like that. No, thank you for inviting me on, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, dude. My pleasure. It was kind of cool how we met, right? Like
Yeah.
I so I'll go ahead and be honest. I think like I've always been familiar and aware of the Near Mint channel. I
Mhm.
think what really won me over by you was that maybe was it this year, or maybe like late last year, you put out a video where you were very candid about being a comic YouTube creator, and not just a YouTube creator in general. And
Oh yeah.
it's like very candid,
This,
it's very honest, candid. And as someone who deals with a lot of things that you were talking about, it just resonated with me. And I was like, wow, this is cool that I get to see the guy behind the microphone. When we turn or hit record, I'm sure you're just like me, boom, like you're Uncanny Omar. You're not Omar that's got like, that's got to worry about performance and algorithms and all the stuff that, goes into making content. I thought that was, that really won me over and got my respect by you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that was something I wanted to do, not because I was lacking content. And it's kind of weird to say that because I put out videos every day, and people ask me like, how do I keep that going? And
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't know. But I thought when I decided to do this full time, like that was one of the biggest hurdles was like, am I gonna keep doing a video every day? How am I gonna keep that up? And then I thought, oh wait, I did a video every day during the pandemic
Hmm.
where books weren't coming out. So I think I'll manage when like now we actually have things
When the
coming out, so
regular
I can
schedule
talk
comes
about
back.
them.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I wanted to do a year kind of retrospect on how this is what I do for a living now and the things that have changed and the things that not a lot of people talk about because everybody sees the glamour, of being
Mm-hmm.
a YouTuber and it's not. I mean, well, at least in my case, it's not just that. there's a
Yeah.
lot of like loneliness and sadness to it that not everybody talks about. So yeah, really didn't know where it was going to go. I had a friend of mine film it, and he was asking questions, and I thought the questions, we just kind of rolled with it.
Yeah, no, it was an excellent, excellent episode, and I recommend anyone listening that's maybe in that position where they're a content creator themselves, or just wants to have an honest conversation with someone that does this. I highly recommend looking at that video. But Omar, I got lucky, right? So I watched this great, very heartfelt episode. I really started paying attention to the channel, and then lo and behold, I run into you in a chance encounter at Heroes Con. You were kind
Yeah.
enough to take a picture of me and my buddy Drew,
Yeah, of
and
course.
there was something about you, right? Like you ever run into someone and you're like, I know you. I know I should know you. You look familiar. I've seen you before. Why can't I connect the dots? And then when you add that on top of, like, it was just a busy Saturday morning. Like, I was running around trying to get like interviews and getting ready for a panel. And had Drew not been so, he's a sweetheart, man. Like, people listen to the show and Drew's like, very boisterous and whatnot. But Drew is such a sweetheart, and he was so polite. He thanked you and he said, "Hey man, what's your name?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm Omar." Dude, at that moment, it felt like, like at the end of Saw, when everything starts coming together and the music like dun 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 dun, that because of that and that, and they kind of put things together. And I was like, "Oh shit, you're Omar." We had a great exchange, and I got you on the podcast. We were able to set this up fairly quickly.
Yeah, of course. I remember your business card and your pin standing. Like, I actually wore my pin when I interviewed
Oh yeah, yeah. Was it
Mark Bagley.
it was the gauntlet, right?
Yeah,
He
it
gave you a
was
gauntlet pin.
because I thought that was so cool and so unique. And then the little card you gave me, I kept
Oh
all that
yeah, I
upstairs.
appreciate it, man. That means a
Yeah.
lot. I didn't have a chance to see the your, because you posted a video showcasing your Heroes Con haul.
Oh
I
no.
haven't had a chance to see that yet, but how'd the rest of your Heroes Con experience and how the rest of the weekend go for you?
Uh, it was fun, and it's always fun to do shows because you're taken out of your element
Hmm.
to cover them, right? But it's also exhausting. So like by the time
Oh yeah.
Saturday night hits and everybody's like, "Hey, you want to go out for drinks?" I'm like, "Hey, does anybody want to take a nap?" Like, no. Okay, yeah, drink sounds fun. Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, let's do
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
Sunday comes around, and Sunday's the day that I'm like, okay, maybe I can relax a little bit and buy something for myself.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was one of those things. Like, we had an accident with, and the things that happen behind the scenes. We had an accident with our brand new camera I was going to take with us, and it broke, so I had
Hmm.
to send it off to get it repaired. Uh, I took the old camera, but the old camera has issues with color correction. I had to reteach myself how to do that on the way there, and
Hmm.
then the audio, and then I still managed to salvage the audio because I could not get this proper audio to come out of it
Good old
uh, by,
technology, man.
by
Good
making
old
it
tech.
mono instead. So I'm like, well, at least we
I
get
got
some
it.
kind of, people, and maybe I do, they expect a certain level of professionalism when it comes to these things. So it adds that level of stress of like,
Hmm.
I can't deliver that. So should I even put that video out there? And I still did because people wanted to see it. So yeah.
Yeah, I've had
They-
those moments of like debilitating doubt of like, doesn't live up to my high like the bar I set for myself. And then a lot of times you end up finding out, at least in my case, that that's just all in my head. Like, really, like, folks know the quality, right? Like, they've come to
Mhm.
expect a certain level of quality, and I think they're more lenient of like, oh, this one just didn't sound good for whatever reason, but the content is good. I think once you build that trust of like, oh, Omar or Badr, they've been delivering good content for years. This might just, who cares if the audio isn't as crisp? Like, I'm here for them. I'm here to hear them talk and them get excited for the creator.
I think you're right. I think we are our biggest critics when it comes
Oh,
to those things.
100%.
And yeah, you're like, okay, do I scrap it? Do I start over? Oh my gosh, it's so exhausting to start over,
Yeah.
with a video, and then like with editing, and then, well, I'm sure you've been doing interviews, and what happens if you interview somebody that had to work things around their schedule to finally give you an interview, and then the audio is bad,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Not on your end, but their end, and
Look,
something that you could have prevented.
yeah, if you're your biggest critic, tech is always going to be your biggest, sometimes like your biggest enemy. And you're like, tech, why would you do this to me? I love you. I've taken care of you.
Everything was working fine, but right before the interview,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
What kind of relationship do we have? Oh man, yeah.
Omar, so I'm going to assume that our listeners would understand that just from the name alone, one doesn't really have to do much guessing that you're a huge X-Men fan. Um,
Yes.
and I think what's really cool about that is that you've had the opportunity. I mean, hell, you recently had Chris Claremont on your channel, not
Oh
for
my
the
god.
first, not for the second, much less the third, but for a fourth time. How was that experience getting the chat? Or really, how was the experience of getting to know and maybe even call like Chris Claremont a friend or a colleague?
Surreal.
Hmm.
Surreal for like the body of work that he has put, you know, and I do this every time. Every time I interview him, right before the interview, I'm like, thank you. Because the reason who I am today has a lot to do with the stories that you wrote, the
Hmm.
characters you created. And you know, he's so humble about it because he hears that all the time. I'm sure he does. There's
Oh
so
yeah.
many people that have come up to him and just thanked him, you know, for, yeah, I mean, seriously, like saving their lives, right? They were in the low point in their lives because they read a particular story that hit them a certain way. They see him as some almost like a savior in a way, right? In a weird way. So he hears it all the time, and he's humble about it.
Yeah, he's a good example of like art like meaning something more to people than just entertainment. You know,
Mhm.
like what you said, like hell, remember his line at Heroes Con? It was like, you
Oh,
know, it was like a traffic jam, you know, and there was that, it was a testament to how many people wanted to come, you know, whether they have like have their books signed or just like shake his hand and you know, get to meet the guy that wrote
yeah.
some of their most, you know, some of the most important X-Men stories out there. Yeah.
And he takes his time with each of them. Now, of course, he's a little bit older, so you have to be mindful of asking a question that's going to take him probably 30 minutes to answer. It
Yeah,
is interesting to do that particular interview. That is the only interview that I don't really interrupt because I don't know where he's going to go with the story. Sometimes he
for
gets
sure.
frustrated about the things he's talking about. He's like, "What the hell's wrong with?"
Yeah.
Anyway, where was like,
Yeah, he's reliving these things. You're like, I'm not gonna interrupt this. This is like gold,
yeah,
and at the same time, I don't want to catch the brunt of
I,
this.
I do feel like every time I interview him, I have to tell him like it's some naturally comes up that I
Mhm.
inform him about some kind of retcon. He gets all mad about it. He's like, "Why would they do that? It's already been established the Morlocks were ugly
Hmm.
mutants." Like it was, but
Interesting.
the first two times, man, it was. I was nervous. I've interviewed like when I had a podcast. I've interviewed celebrities. I've interviewed Peter Cullen, who's like my favorite voice actor. Did the voice of Optimus Prime when I was a kid, and interviewed him twice. Chris Claremont is the only person I just remember. Even Elvira, I had Elvira on the show, and
Oh
I
wow,
was I was completely cool with her, and that was
that's
one of my
awesome.
biggest crushes when I was a kid. Still to this day, she's a lovely looking lady. The just something about him, just it's like I'll become a kid again, and I'm like, oh, Mr. Claremont, and he's just like, you don't have to call me that. It's just Chris. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Um, it's so surreal. Like,
Mm.
yeah, talking about like how like as far as like accomplishments on the channel, and then how do you measure success? Oh my god, yeah, for like having him on 4 times
Yeah, that's a
and
good.
talking about X-Men story. Oh my gosh, yeah, forget about it, man. That's a good my childhood dream come true.
Yeah, that's a good benchmark. That's a great benchmark. All right, Omar. So before we like really dive into the YouTube and get nerdy about
Sure.
like collected editions and all that, I want to hear about your origin story. I mean, because you know, after all, every great I think comic book character has a great origin story to match. So I want to know what is your earliest memory of comics? Did you have them in the house growing up?
Yeah, actually, I've told this story on my channel before, but not I haven't done it in a long time. I had appendicitis when I was a kid,
Hmm.
so I'm originally from Peru.
Okay.
So we had a free children's clinic. We stood in line, and I was hospitalized for quite a number of days after the operation. And I was 7 years old, and my uncle sent a care patch. He lived in Miami, and
Okay.
he sent a care package of like candy bars and comics. And I remember the comics, like he sent Spider Man, X Men, but the one that stood out was like X Men. It was Kitty Pryde from issue 168.
Hmm.
Now, I spoke Spanish and read Spanish. I did not read English. So I would just flip through these books and just was captivated by the art and following the sequential art. Because you don't need to read to follow the sequential art to kind of figure out what's going on.
Especially when a master, like, especially when a really good artist is
Mhm.
capable of telling the story without any of the words, right? Like the words are that extra layer of context, and really kind of get you into
Yeah.
the mind of the characters. But a really good artist is able to just draft a story of great composition without any words needed.
And that was Paul Smith. So, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, yeah. And um, I used to read this comic called Condorito in Peru,
Hmm.
and that was all in Spanish. And that was kind of weird because it was like adult humor, but in a children's comic. It was a lot different than like American comics. So my uncle would ship me comics, and
Cool.
we ended up moving here to the United States in 1987. And I lived in Miami for a while. Then we moved up here to Kentucky, where I currently live. And that summer of 87 was my summer of like learning English. And
Hmm.
big part of it was a huge part of it was comic books. And a big part of it was the Mutant Massacre, like learning to read English through the Mutant Massacre. So it was really hard, as a kid growing up. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitate towards X-Men. I didn't have a lot of friends because there was a language barrier here.
Hmm.
I didn't speak English. I got thrown into a Catholic private school and got into a lot of fights. And it's it's just one of those things that I was so happy when I got home. Oh, I get to read X-Men. So life's good again. It kind of like became my second family. And I think that's why it will always hold a special place in my heart. That particular run, those particular characters. And then from that, I just kept reading more and more comics. I had to travel. Like my mom and dad, God bless them, they took me like an hour to go to a comic book store because the local one had just unfortunately went out of business
Hmm.
like in 89 here where I lived in Kentucky. And so they took me about an hour. I'd save my money. And I don't know if you remember, but like before the internet, we used to have like mailway places where you can order comics. You couldn't, it's weird to think about that. You couldn't see the comics, but they just gave you like a price guide of how much it was, how much shipping was. You'd send a money order, and then maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 months later, you get a comic back and you're like, oh my gosh, it's one that I've been missing from from the books I'm collecting. So I started getting into Spider-Man. I started getting into Batman.
Hmm.
I started really weird dive into DC comics with like Crisis on Infinite Earths
Oh
number
yeah.
8 being my first DC comic, which so confusing. I'm like, why is the Flash dead? Like, this is so strange. Um, and yeah, because of a comic book store, and then we had a new one that came into our town. I was able to get back issues because that's the other thing too. But back then, we also not only did we not have the internet, but we also didn't have collected editions the way we do now.
Hmm.
We had a graphic novel. We had maybe like Batman Dark Knight Returns in collected edition, and that was it. I mean, there wasn't this, and
Exactly.
it's so different these days. But yeah, so you had to go in and fill in those holes with going to flea. I would go to a flea market. I'd frequent a flea market, and the guy had the coolest name. His name was Dr. Comics. I don't think he had a PhD. He set
Probably
up
a safe bet, I think, Omar.
yeah, yeah. He set up at the local, or it was in a local flea market. It was about 30 minutes from here. My mom and dad just love flea markets, and I would just spend hours at that place, just sitting there with my brother. And he was cool enough. He had like a quarter box. So I bought a bunch of like Marvel team ups, a bunch of DC comics from like the Bronze Age. It was just a really fun time of digging through there. And it's hard to explain that now, when it comes to like that almost rush you get when you find that missing issue and you
Oh
find it
yeah.
for like a quarter. You're like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for this crappy Atari Force issue number 4. And because we do have things like collected editions, and we have the internet where you can order your collected editions, and we have my channel where you can find out how to properly read Superman in collected
Yeah.
editions. But back then it was just kind of like this open world, like a video game, right? Like you were given this like there's no ending to this like this world, and you're just
Yeah.
free to walk around it and explore it yourself. And I kind of almost miss that. I kind of wish my kids would go through something like that of trying to
Yeah.
find these things.
That's like the downside of having everything so available at like your fingertips, is that there isn't that much, I think, I won't say hardship, but there isn't, like, it's so easy, right? It's like, well, I don't need to spend an hour or two
Mhm.
shop bouncing from shop to shop to look for one issue. I can probably find on my comic shop, or I go on eBay. But I know exactly what you mean. Like some of the fondest memories I have when it comes to comic books I've got the memories of my dad where, he got me into it. So he would take me to all the local shops around here and we would just dig for like hours in dollar and quarter bins. We would just dig, man. Like my mom would be so upset that we missed dinner or we got home late, but it was like really good bonding time between us. And then, I mentioned Drew, like some of when we first started hanging out, that was our thing on the weekends. We worked at Target. We'd work Monday through Friday, and then Saturday we were hitting the road early because we found out about a shop, 2 hours from here. Oh, this spot right here isn't a comic shop, but they got a dollar bin, in the back, and it was so much fun to like have a list, help each other out, and just that sense of camaraderie and that hunt, right? Like just
Yes.
looking for stuff was just fun. Whether and I think even like all the L's that you took, I didn't find crap this whole day. Like my
Oh,
fingers
right.
are dusty. I didn't get anything. But then you're right, with that moment that you come across that grail or that issue or that missing piece that you needed was like all worth it. It was like part of the experience, as part of like being a collector.
Now I say that, and I'm also 44 now, so I do appreciate the blessing of having the internet and having
Oh,
to
100%.
click on
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
just at a fingertip away. Because I mean, while the rush is fun, it's still like I don't have the time or energy to
And
go
that's
out
and
there.
that's the difference, right? Is that I had a lot of disposable time and income back in the day. Now I'd be lucky to even have an hour to like just read comics as it is. So I feel you on that. Omar, you mentioned that you worked at a comic shop in your early days. What's the comic scene in Kentucky like?
Not as good as it used to be, but I'm pretty sure that's everywhere these days.
Hmm.
It's we don't have a local comic book store anymore. I mean,
Oh
most of
wow.
the ones that I grew up are gone. There's a couple in like the bigger cities, like Louisville, but all the ones that I grew up with around Lexington have either been rebranded, sold out, and just gone. There was a Lexington and Louisville are the two biggest cities in Kentucky, and
Hmm.
there was one in Lexington. There's a gentleman. He passed away of cancer, but his son ended up inheriting the store back in the early odds, and he was known for his just gold age comic books, like the golden age stuff that he had. And that place is now gone. I always wonder like whatever happened to the stock and the inventory of those
Hmm.
places. So it's not. Yeah, it kind of sucks. Yeah, it kind of sucks. That's what I will say.
Omar, you are a very honest guy. That's what I like about you, man.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
but that is a bummer that there's not a lot of local comic shops. I mean, if there's anything to get out of this, listeners, is that if you have a local comic shop around you or a decent comic book community in your area, don't take advantage of it. Right? Like you're one of the lucky ones. Not every big city or area has any local comic shops around. So take advantage of that. Don't be ungrateful is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, definitely
Um,
support your local comic book store.
Well said. Exactly. So, Omar, I know the channel is focused on collected editions, hardcovers, omnibuses, etc. Well, I guess you kind of answered this question. I was going to ask if you had frequented a local comic shop, but maybe more so we can pivot it to just in general. Like, do you pick up floppies or single issues, like, or do you read them digitally or use any of the comic apps out there?
Um, so I mainly stick to collected editions, and I made that
Okay.
like my thing back in 2000, about 2004, or yeah, Uncanny X-Men 500 was like the last single issue I
Hmm.
picked up. And sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes I will go and get a single issue, or I'll try to read it digitally. Especially, we live in the age of the internet, and if it's a hot story like the follow up to like Jonathan Hickman's Hoxpox, like Inferno, I'm like I can't have this spoiled. But somehow I managed to stay away from spoilers. I read the first issue and I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
can wait. I can wait. So yes, if it's something I can't wait for, or to prepare for the overview of a trade that's coming out, sometimes I do get through digitally.
Okay. And honestly, man, your shtick is, I think, at a great time because if I'm just going off of not only my own kind of, I gravitate towards just waiting for trades and collected editions myself. I do pick up a few floppies because I got a pretty good local comic shop around me. But a lot of our listeners that chime in, I think it's safe to say a lot of them prefer trade waiting because it's just easier. Like the amount of books that come out and having to stay to date with things and all that. But a lot of our listeners are adults that have a lot of responsibilities. I think trade waiting is just such a more convenient a method of collecting and catching up with their favorite stories. So I say that
I
to say I think your channel, yeah, it's like I think it's it's a great channel to have right now, especially if everyone's kind of like gravitating towards these really nice hardcovers and collected editions that come out.
I I I think it's one of those things that, to me, it's like the best way to own these books
Hmm.
and relive my childhood of having these single issues. Each book I open up reminds me of like where I was at a certain point. And I think that's always been the case with me and comics. It always reminds me of that final page of Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. Like when he's sitting there and thinking about every coin. Sometimes I sit back and I think about like where where I
Yeah.
was when I read these collected editions. Because they're like a time capsule of
Hmm.
who I was at the time too. And I love this format because I think it looks so good on a bookshelf. And the older I get, I start seeing more and more people that used to read comics like 10 years ago and they stopped, or 20 years ago, and they
Hmm.
have now just found out. I can't imagine their surprise when they're like, "Wait a minute. The books I used to read in my youth are now inside of a nice collected edition, and I can put it
And I
on my
don't got to be
shelf."
ashamed. Yeah, yeah, I don't got to be
Yeah,
ashamed
now I
about
can show my
displaying it.
friends like, "Behold, my library," right? It's not a bunch of short boxes or long boxes.
Yeah.
There's just something visually pleasing about books,
Hmm.
and having them in the nicest format possible. I love the DC Absolute formats.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the omnibus formats, but I'm also a reader, so I don't mind trade paperback. Some books are only available in trade paperback,
Yep.
but I love them, man. They're like I'm also a physical collector of like video games and movies. So if it's a special video game, if it's a special movie, and there's a 4K limited edition with a bunch of crap I don't need that I'll never use, that's it's $70. I'm like, done. That's all I need. I need
Yeah.
the Willow limited edition with the, I don't know, a wand or something that I'll never prop somewhere. Yeah. But I
Understood.
love them for this, for that physical media. It reminds me, that it's still a thing.
Yep. So I know we probably have a few a good helping, I'm sorry, of mentees tuning in, and because you kind of garnered that. That's how loyal I'll say is your community, is that I was hopping on the live and they were even asking, hey, where can we catch this interview? So safe to assume we've got some mentees in the house tuning in. But for anyone tuning in that might not be familiar with near mint condition, with the channel or yourself, can you tell us what was the start of the channel, and what was the catalyst for you to go full time? Because it sounds like that was just something that only happened just recently.
Oh yeah. So um I used to have a podcast back in 2004 to 2008.
That is
Uh,
OG era for the record. I told you I started 2012. Yeah, 2012.
uh-huh.
The class or the folks that were doing podcasting before then, those were guys were like those are like OGs, because that was definitely like if podcasting, advertising and telling people about podcasting was tough during that time for me, I know in the '04 '08 era it was like, what? Is
I
that a
know.
food?
Having to explain what a podcast was in 2004. First of all, it was my buddy Dan that sold me on it. I'm like, wait, it's like a radio thing, but through the
Hmm.
internet. And he was like, yeah, these little. He pulled out his iPod. I'm like, what is that? And he
He's
was
like, this
listen.
purple icon here that no one uses at all or knows what the hell this is? This is what it does.
Yeah, so that because we used to write like review for I used to review manga and action figures for an anime magazine. It was called Beckett
Hmm.
Anime Magazine. My wife reviewed video games. It was a lot of fun to get to talk to people. And a matter of fact, like when I had a yard sale, like I had a bunch of extra books I was selling, and one person, I'll never forget this. Like he was like, "How did you get all these, man?" I'm like, "Oh, I used to write some of the articles." He was like, "What?" He was freaking out because he was like, "Are you the toy guy?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I used to review like the Dragon
That's
Ball
cool.
stuff." And he was like, "Dude, I used to read your articles." He's like, and he had me sign it. It was the most
Oh,
flattering
that's
thing ever,
cool.
like at a
That is
yard
cool.
sale. I'm like, "You
Yeah.
really
That-
want me to sign that?" Sure,
it's the small victories, man. It's the
dude.
small
It was
victories that make you feel like, oh, thank God someone's listening or someone's
right.
reading.
Somebody read it. Somebody read it
Yeah.
after all those years. So we did a podcast, and then fast forward years later, we got married, kids, took a break, and I brought up the idea of like, hey, let's start doing something like that. But I kind of want to do something visually. So the idea of near mint condition we came out through like different names. I think at one time I wanted to call it Crisis, no, Midlife Crisis on Infinite Earths, something like that. Because it felt like we got to do something. We got to put our voice
Yeah,
out
yeah.
there again. And
You're
then
like,
like,
look, you're like, look, our target demographic are going to be, 30, 40-year olds having midlife crisis. Let's go ahead
right.
and just, capitalize on that.
So instead, I decided let's use near mint condition, and it can just describe ourselves, our souls, not just the books that we read or the things we
Hmm.
collected. So it kind of started as like a roundtable discussion. Each of us focusing on our own thing. Mine was always comics, but I've kind of ventured out into everything. I love video games, or I did
Hmm.
when I had time to play them. Toys and movies and anime. So eventually, we did it for like 3 years before I decided to. Oh no, 2 years, and I decided to start showing things that I wanted to see. Like part of the idea of doing this channel was like, oh, I really want to showcase videos that I would love to have seen, like when I started collecting collected editions, because it can get rather overwhelming and confusing, especially when you're doing reading orders.
Hmm.
So I started doing reading orders, and people really enjoyed those. And I started doing haul videos, which I never thought I'd be the person to do a haul video because I just never found myself that interesting to talk about things. But then people were like, man, I really like when you talk about the book. Maybe you could just overview that particular book. So that kind of went into like me talking more about these books. And um, yeah, and that I'll never forget the first time I did a solo video. I deleted it because somebody said I talk too much. And I was like, well, maybe I do, and maybe,
Hmm.
And then I said, you know what? I'm old enough. I don't give a crap. Like, I'm just gonna go put it out there, and if somebody listens, they'll listen. So I did a second video, uh, and then we had COVID happen, so then we needed to change the channel up, and all of them started a separate channel because they thought, or they thought it would be really cool to just kind of give me the spotlight on Near Mint Condition. So there's a channel called Near Mint Collective, which I'm still part of, where I get to hang out with my friends when I have the time. So this became a full time thing. I lost my job in July of 2020. In July of 2020, because of COVID, I was a product manager for networking at a company, and I've been doing IT for 20 years of my life. And during the pandemic, as many people did, lost their jobs, and it was really hard to find something. And the only job offers I was ever getting was like contract work, and was like,
Hmm.
and I needed security and some kind of stability because I have kids and I need insurance, like things like that. And that was some depressing times while I was still doing the channel every day. Nobody knew, and that's because I've always been kind of quiet about things like that. Nobody needs to know. My job
Yeah.
is to entertain people, not to bring
Hmm.
my personal problems to them for a solution. That's the way I've always handled the channel. So July that happened, and man, it was bad, dude. It was like I finally started getting job offers, and it was like tier one stuff. And I've been in IT for 20 years, so I had to look at my life and go, okay, I can go back 20 years of my career if that's what it takes. Because no matter what, I got to keep a roof over our head.
Yep.
I have to keep
You
food
got
on the table.
responsibilities.
I got kids. My wife, she works, but it wasn't enough to keep it going. So that was, let me see, that come October, because it was that long that I was on unemployment. Come October, I had a I'm very blessed by this. Marvel approached me about sponsoring some of the videos that I do, like especially the announcement videos where I wear a suit. Um,
And those were the videos where I think I had first started, where I got introduced to you was that I was like, oh, this is the guy in the suits that always talks. Because I mean, to be honest, like you do have a very unique angle when it comes to like comic book reviews and content on YouTube. Is that you do review like really nice. There's like a certain prestige to it, right? Like the visual look of you being in a suit and tie, talking about like omnibuses and collected editions. I was like, oh, that's like a really cool kind of chemistry that he's got going on. Like people that collect these oversized books typically do so because it looks good and they want to display it in a very classy way. So that was yeah, those early days, where you were having the suit and tie. And I mean, I'm sure, I think you still do. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I
but
do.
yeah,
It,
I thought I was like, wow, that is a cool visual look for that channel.
so the story behind that is
The working man, you were the working man comic YouTuber, is what I got. I was like, oh, I can vibe with this as a fellow corporate guy who does project management. I've been working in IT for a minute too. Yeah, that story resonates with me. I was like, okay, he's the working man,
so
comic YouTuber.
I that was purely coincidence. Like it wasn't a gimmick. It was I'll dude. I think I've shared this story. I don't remember where, but I found out I was being fired on a Friday, and
Oof.
not just me, but I had to let my people know
Hmm.
they were being let go. And my job, like that was in I think in March or something, and we had enough months right to get ready, and I had to stay because of my contract.
Hmm.
I found out that Friday I was being fired, and I got an email from David Gabriel from Marvel. It was something we were working on, like doing announcements of Omnis. He's like, "Hey, all this is approved. Go ahead and release the announcement." Now, I came home and I remember thinking, because I had a suit because I was in that meeting with corporate, and I thought I can go out drinking and do something really stupid, or I could turn my real crappy day into like somebody else's good day.
Hmm.
Um, because I remember when I would get that sense of like excitement when I would look at things that were coming up. Like, oh, this book is being released next year. That's awesome. I can't wait until March of next year or
Hmm.
April of next year. It's that feeling of like when you watch a movie trailer and it's like, why isn't it now? But I'm so excited. It's like, it did something to me, like looking at announcements. And I remember thinking, because I had been doing announcements before then, but just in a t shirt. I remember somebody emailing me. It was a beautiful email, like how this gives them a purpose. He was like, I know this sounds silly, but it gives me a purpose to live. Like my
Hmm.
life has been crap. And this announcement of this particular book gives me something to look forward to in life. And I remember he was really honest with me. Like it was a really powerful email. And so I started thinking of like people like that who need something. So yeah, instead of like coming home and going out drinking, doing something stupid,
Yeah.
I came home and I made a video with my suit.
Yeah. You channeled that those emotions, man, into something positive. And I think that's probably what resonated with people was, that honest, raw emotion and just redirecting it. Like you said, you could have went a different route and you really could have let it beat you up, justifiably so.
Yeah.
But the fact that you decided to use it for positivity, look, hey, this is amazing. This is amazing Spider-Man right here, right? Like we've learned this since we were kids and getting into comics. With great power must also come great responsibility, and you decided to fulfill that responsibility.
Yeah. I'm not like, patting my own back for doing that. I just thought that's really how it started. And people were
Hmm.
like, man, every time you make an announcement, you should wear a suit. I was like,
It's a good look.
I
It's a good
couldn't
look.
let them know the real story. The real story was I just lost my job and it
Yeah.
sucked.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, David and Marvel, we made a contract and it was amazing. Like, and with that and YouTube ad revenue, which of course like anybody on YouTube knows it's not much, but with Patreon, like I
Hmm.
looked at the numbers, I looked at our finances, and I was like, I talked to my wife, because of course with this, if you're doing something like this, like you have to have your significant other on
For
board,
sure.
or it's not gonna work. Not just financially on board, but also have your back.
Yeah.
And I'm
And
very
and your wife
blessed.
Melanie, she's a part of the show. I mean, she was on the live
Yeah,
this morning that
yeah,
I tuned. Astonishing
she's
Melanie, right?
yeah, she's great. She's phenomenal, and I'm very lucky because she is the most supportive person. So like I never like sharing that part of the story because it feels like I don't know. Like I said earlier, my job is to keep people entertained,
Mhm.
not to bring down the mood of whatever I'm talking about.
Dude,
But
it's real stuff, and I think one of my it's real stuff, and I think some of the errors I was making, kind of in the middle of my podcasting journey, was I was really getting into the numbers, the stats, like trying to take it to the next level. I was really like money oriented, so I kind of stopped, and I really leaned in onto the persona, right? And then those episodes just weren't performing as well as like ones where I just like relaxed and allowed myself to like be open. And like it's always fun when you get when that connects with your listeners, especially like when you get an email where people are asking genuine questions. We're like, hey, I enjoy the content, but how are you? You brought this up
yeah,
this episode. There's something supportive, like to build a community that not only cares and champions your content, but also cares about you as a person. Like it's an interesting way of how this passion hobby of ours can lead us to like friends and people that look out for us and build that like real bond. And I think you can only get that when you decide to sometimes let the guard down or put the persona to the side, and it's like, hey guys, I'm a person just like you. And it sounds
yeah,
like
and
it worked in your favor.
I think that's what that's why I started doing the Saturday streams too. So yeah, so it kind of came out like, and so that was in October where I'm like, I think we can do this if we revamp Patreon and come January.
Hmm.
Um, so it kind of came out naturally because I don't like lying and I'm not good at it. But somebody asked me on the Saturday stream, like, what do I do for a living? And I was like, oh crap, like I'm like this right now when I had to share
Yeah.
my story. This is before we revamped everything, and I made a
Hmm.
video about going full time with this. So yeah, it was definitely one of those things that it wasn't. I think the right way, or I'm sorry, the way that we are taught to do this is build enough of a fan base, make the money, quit your
Hmm.
crappy job, become a YouTube superstar. Yeah, that's not the way this worked for me. Uh, I was 42 in 20 years in IT. So it was a lot for me to go, is this what I really want to do? Like at my age, become a YouTube influencer or whatever we're called these days. Um, because is there any coming back from this, or am I committing career suicide? Because if I wait around until 2021, the jobs that I'm applying for will start coming open. But I was never happy in IT, it wasn't me. I did my job, I was good at it, and I've changed a lot of lives by hiring people that normally nobody else would take a chance on. So, if I could, like, I remember thinking, okay, like, what kind of message is this showing my children, right? Like, and man, it was a really good friend of mine, one of my best friends. He was like, look at it this way, dude. Like, you're actually giving them the best. Like, you're sending them the right message. It was like, if you work hard and if you, I mean, don't have any expectations, you can achieve your dreams. Like, what better message to give your kids? And it kind of opened my eyes when he said it like that, because I didn't want to give my kids the message of like, stop working because you too can become a YouTube sensation or something like that, right? Which I didn't want them to live on false hope, because it doesn't happen. It's very difficult. It's a
Hmm.
rare chance of people putting themselves out there in this huge community of YouTubers that have a million subscribers, a billion subscribers, like, and shine above everybody else, or shine above, to make it an actual living. Like, so it wasn't an overnight thing of like, I'm gonna be a YouTube star, it's gonna be great. No, it wasn't
Yeah.
like that. I wish it was, but mine was just kind of, holy crap, I lost my job, what am I gonna do? Like, so I kind of just, yeah, I kind of made it my own thing, where I wasn't getting job offers. I just decided to make my own thing and took a gamble, and so far, knock on wood, it's been a blessing. It's been amazing.
I appreciate you for sharing that. Yeah, that is an awesome story, very inspiring story, and I think I probably speak for, everyone tuning in, especially the mentee folks tuning in. That I think we're all happy that you took that leap of faith, and it's worked out so well for you.
Yeah,
I
I
w-
I think I mean, there was always constant fear, and that never goes away. But that kind of keeps you on your toes too. But
Exactly.
don't
Good.
also don't forget to
It's
have
a good
fun.
driving force, man. It's a good driving
Yeah,
force
it
in
it
this.
totally is,
Yeah.
right? Gotta stay creative.
Yeah.
Never.
All right.
Oh gosh, dude, and let me tell you something, man. Like
Hmm.
I don't know. I tell this story to my wife all the time. I don't know if it's a Latino thing or a Catholic thing or what, but I hate asking people for money. So when I was like, I don't want to make a video about Patreon,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and she was, dude, my wife, like I said, you have to have that supportive person. She was like, do it.
Yeah, it's as and I think I can add to that. It might be that brown person pride. As someone who came from like a being an immigrant myself, like it's just that yeah, you don't show the weakness, right? You're not going to ask people for money. There's already a stigma there, coming to the States and all that. So it's just that brown person pride, dude. Trust me.
Brown person
I
pride.
learned it. I learned it from my mom. I learned it from my mom.
Yeah, my
All
dad's
right.
the same way. My dad was the same way.
Yeah,
He has a lot of pride and doesn't
for
like
sure.
the help, but
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, my wife was like, "Do it," because that's the only
Hell
way
yeah.
this is gonna work, and I'm
Hell yeah.
glad she did. She
All
told
right.
me to.
I want to dive into the channel and really get to talking about collected editions. I rarely get to like really talk about
Okay.
collected editions, hard covers, omnibuses, etc. And you already kind of explained why you went the collected edition route and made your focused on that. It was something unique. You liked them yourself, and there's a lot of and it's a great, I think, gateway for not only new fans but also longtime readers to get back into comics or just into comics in general. And you posted a video this week, and it was about your June 2022 haul video. So all the books that you got in, whether I think some that were sent to you, I think some that you bought. It was just a lot of books, right? I think I counted 20 books in this haul, and they weren't just small
Oh
books. All
no.
right, listeners, they weren't like single issue. They weren't like a good haul from the local comic shop. We're talking about you got several omnibuses. You got other phone book size books that you got in this month. You had like a
Yeah.
question omnibus that looked great. There was 100 bullets hardcover that looked like it was 100 pounds. And then I saw like the Last Ronin hardcover in there. So it was a good mix of like new stuff, classics, etc. And I wanted to know how much of that haul do you expect to actually get around to reading? And then how much time do you like devote to sitting down and reading those books?
Oh man. That is such a good question and one that I get asked often. And I'll be honest, like, you always hear the grass is greener, right? Like you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm gonna do that for a living, and it'd be
Yeah.
great to do that for a living. Read comics and talk about it. Oh my gosh. But that's the thing with doing it for a living. You have to take it seriously. Like
Hmm.
you have to take it like a business. Like you have to treat it like a business. You have to treat it like your job. You get up early. You set time aside to read. You set time aside to do research. And on top of that, you got to make the video, edit the video,
Yep.
put the video together, send it out there. Um, so I spend quite a number of hours reading. But the good thing is like one of those things that I've always enjoyed reading. I read every day. My brothers would always ask me like, "How the heck do you read so much?" And I'm like, "Dude, I read every day. Every day I'm reading something,
Does it
and I'm
ever
still
real
enjoying it too."
I was just about to say, does it ever feel like work rather than fun? Because I know for me, it's like there's books that I want to read, like
Yeah,
that I just want to read, and then there's books that I need to read for the show to get ready for an
yeah,
upcoming episode, etc. And sometimes that feels more like work than fun because when you start thinking of like, all right, I got to research, I got to format the show this way, make sure I get to this point. Like, does it ever feel like work for you?
yes. So what I had to learn was also like I'm a completist, not just in
Mm,
collecting, but also in reading. Even if
okay.
I'm not enjoying a stupid book, I'm like, oh, I gotta get all the way through it. I'm sure there's some wonderful gold in this.
Yeah.
Um, I had to learn not to do that anymore. I had to learn to read more than one title because I was always like, okay, I'm gonna read this cover to cover. That's it. No, there's no more of that. There is like I'm gonna read as much of this as possible before I jump into
Hmm.
the next big book. Luckily, because I've been reading for over 30, oh my goodness, 35 years. A lot of these stories that are now being collected, I've read in the past a lot more than once. So I can remember. Um, but when it's like newer issues, I do have to set time aside to like start reading the trades that are coming out.
Okay.
Sometimes I can't finish it, and that's okay. Like I have to move on to the next thing. I
Sure.
still find time to read for fun. I have a stack of books on my bedside, like on my table. It's like, yeah, probably about 5 books that are there. Some Transformers, some stuff that I don't really do overviews of that I still read
Mhm.
for fun. It's
Oh, yeah.
cut into my video game playing though. But then again, like having kids did that. Like having 2 little girls like that I love hanging out with definitely cut into my video game playing. Can't play
I
those games
imagine.
anymore, man, where I'm screaming at 12-year-old kids and cursing at them.
Yeah, now you've got 12-year-olds screaming at you,
Yeah.
in the house. I got you. So are you reading like are you reading the omnibuses themselves, or are you like reading them in smaller formats like a hardcover or a smaller collected edition? Because that's always been my thing about omnibuses. They
Mhm.
look great. I love displaying them, but reading them it can be a little challenging, right? They're very heavy.
They're
You
big.
know, yeah, they're huge, right? Like, are you reading the omnibuses, or are you selecting like a smaller format to go with?
No, I always read the books. And part of the reason I do
Mm,
that is because sometimes like part of the getting a review copy, or at least I feel like having the responsibility of getting a review
yep,
copy is
I can
making
see that.
sure, the bind holds up, or
Hmm.
sometimes there are printing errors. I will say though, like whenever you've taught yourself to speed read, you're not gonna find a lot of. There's sometimes that I get emails like, "Omar, how'd you miss this? Like the entire page has no dialogue," and I'm like, "I don't know. I thought they were being artsy.
Yeah,
No
it's like,
dialogue. It's
dude.
been done before."
Yeah, you're like,
Um,
dude. Listen, I'm reading 1,000 pages like an hour. I'm gonna miss some stuff.
right, and sometimes I do catch things and I point them out, and I mean, unfortunately, it's too late for the publishers to do anything about. But
Hmm.
like, I'll talk about the build of the paper, how well the book holds together. Like I did the Spawn compendium, and my spine cracked after reading all of it. I'm like, see, this is what
Oof.
happens when you have a big book like this, and it's a soft cover. You're gonna have eventually this crease that kind of sucks whenever you're putting it on the bookshelf. So I do try to read, but like I said, I feel like that's my. I mean, it's my job, right? So I think it's fair if a company is sending me something to give it a proper overview, and
Yep.
to also, let people be aware of how thick the paper is, because that bothers some people.
Hmm.
Um, where it was printed, that also bothers some people. Yeah, so it's all these
Hold up.
things.
Those are some interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Like I know like there are some hardcore collected edition snobs that I think that like the Swamp Thing collected editions throughout the years usually come to mind when I think of like the snobs that are looking at the printing quality, the paper quality, the color reproduction. Like what are
Yeah,
some other things that collected edition hyper fans are, what are some of their irks? What are some things that irks them or they're looking at? Especially, like, I guess, in your opinion too. What are you normally looking at when you get a nice collected edition and you're going about reviewing it?
sometimes I really look at the build or the
Hmm.
block. I've had collected editions that have come unglued, so that PVA glue has come undone. That, yeah, it usually means like whatever factory it was in made a mistake, not enough glue. Um, a lot of the issues that I have are these censorship issues when it comes to certain things.
Hmm.
Like products of their time, to me, should always be kept products of their time. I'm okay with a sticker, or I'm sorry, a label like, hey, these books, this
Yeah.
dialogue is a product of its time. We at so and so publisher feel like it's important to keep them the way they were originally printed, so we are not changing the dialogue. It seems like a lot, and I understand completely. It seems like a lot lately there has been some change in dialogue, or things like blacked out certain words.
Okay.
Some of them, like I said, I completely understand. Racial slurs, things like that from books, and I really think it depends on the story that's being told. Though, to sometimes those words can show exactly why a certain character. How do I put this without spoiling things? If a certain character is using some word to compare it to the word mutie, I feel
Hmm.
like that's an important impact, that words do have power. And in order to show that, that you have to compare it to such and such word. Um, there have been books that have not been printed because it's deemed too either racist sometimes, homophobic sometimes. Like I said, products of their time. And I have no idea how some of these golden age books are going to be handled.
Interesting.
It's like I don't find myself like a true purist comic historian, um, but I do like stories being
As faithful as
printed
they
as they came out.
got it.
Yeah, I'm a fan of like Astro Boy, like Astro Boy Osamu Tezuka, and there is a disclaimer there. At every volume has a disclaimer on the manga that's like, there are certain portrayals of Africans in here that
Hmm.
are deemed racist. So part of that has to also to do with the history of that. Like Osamu Tezuka had never seen a black person in his life. He was just drawing based on what like
The
the
caricatures and the
portrayal of like
stereotypes he had seen. Yeah.
cartoons that he had seen, like a lot of the ones like from Disney or
Hmm.
WB, right? So there is a history behind everything, I think. So
Got it.
uh,
Okay.
when, I don't even know how we got onto that topic. That's what bought, like I want everything printed the way that it was
Got it.
originally
Got it.
supposed to be, and
Now,
let me as the reader decide. That's weird.
no,
So
that's an interesting topic you bring up because I guess it makes me think like my own thoughts on that, and
mhm.
I always feel like it. I guess I'm right there with you with the stickers. Like the stickers to me shows that the publisher is aware and owning, and I guess owning up to it, quotation mark, owning up to it. But at the same time, they do value like the creative freedom that they're giving their artists. I think it shows like their respect for the
Yeah,
creator's art because it's like, look, it's not up to us to. This is what it was released as. Like it's a product of its time. We are taking ownership in that fact and giving you that warning, but. I think I stand a little more behind a publisher that's willing to be like, we're not here to censor our artists or their creative property and how they go about it, but we will warn you so you can make the decision yourself whether you want to read it. Because at the end of the day, you don't got to read anything that
right.
that upsets you or offends you. That's
Mhm.
all fine. But I do appreciate when a publisher at least does that favor.
Oh man, there's nothing more that ticks me off more than a manga US publisher changing someone's art. Oh,
Right.
that makes me mad
Right.
because more than likely said mangaka was not aware that his art being published in English has been changed. Oh, that
And
makes me mad.
exactly, and in that case, right, it's like the same sensibilities that we have or cherish or value or go about may not be the same in
Same.
another
Exactly.
culture, and you've got to respect that too, right? I guess within reason, but yeah, I'm right there with you. There's a lot of nuance to that.
Mhm. But most of my fan base will tell you it's usually something they're very picky about was the big spine change. As
That's
a
what I wanted to hear.
collector, people hate change. Me myself, of course, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm collecting, I don't know, Simpsons DVDs. I always think of the Simpsons DVDs where they like Volume 6 came out and they started to go with the head cases, like the character
Hmm.
head cases. I'm like, well, that's stupid. I just collected 5 volumes and they gave me the head. Like,
Yeah.
the same thing happened to, Marvel did the spine change on the classic books,
Hmm.
where they decided to use a smaller font. People call it tiny font. The older we get, it does become tiny. And they added an image. It's a change they've been wanting to do, and they did it in 2021 with the Fantastic Four Volume 2.
Hmm.
And people were upset. Like, oh, I've been collecting these from day one. But I also remember that when the Marvel Masterworks changed in the design, people were saying the same thing. I feel like I've been betrayed by the publisher, and I feel like yeah, to of course,
Yeah.
right. We've come to expect beautiful
Yeah.
books that are supposed to look a certain way on the shelf, and all of a sudden you're going to throw tiny fonts with an image at the bottom. You're changing the spines up, and not only that, but you're reprinting the original books with that new look. So now I'm like, oh man, should I go back and buy those, or am I too cheap to do that, or I ain't got the money to
Yeah.
do that? Me, I have to have,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have, I'm not that bad when it comes to like, to me it's what's on the inside that still counts, but I
For
can
sure.
understand it.
Yeah,
But
as a collector, you can appreciate like the want to have consistency in the way you display book or the
absolutely.
consistency in your books. Like it can't be like one, two, and then all of a sudden like it's an image of Swamp Thing instead of three. You're like, what? Now this just throws it off. It's easy to laugh from the outside, because it is kind of comical, right? It's like, wow, that is a very nitpick thing to do. But as someone who's been collecting and you kind of take solace and joy in displaying and like really being conscious about the way you curate your books, it can be annoying as a collector when a publisher decides to completely switch up the design and it just throws everything off. You're like, God damn it, come on.
I feel like I've been mentally and emotionally prepared for this day already because of years of collecting manga.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
manga just had it the worst. Manga, like, especially if
yeah.
it was translated by like Viz or Dark Horse, one month the Dark Horse logo is up here. The next month the Dark Horse logo is down at the bottom. The
Mhm.
3 months later the Dark Horse logo is a little bit smaller. It's offline, and I'm like, man, who is designing this? What's happening? So
What
those were years of collecting manga. I think has mentally and emotionally prepared me for the day of the spine changes in omnibus editions.
Yeah. So Omar, I want to say, in all your videos, as someone like that hops on and does video interviews, your background, I think you've positioned your chair and your setup very well. Like just being at the corner of
Oh,
where your two
yeah.
bookshelves meet,
Thanks,
and
man.
it's visually appealing, right? Like as a collector, I'm sitting here watching you talk, but I'm also like, okay, I see. It looks like, oh, he's got a Squadron Supreme hardcover. Nice. Oh, that's a 1602. Nice. What are those IDW? You know, I'm like, it's cool to like just have some visual representation. And I was curious, out of well, I'm sorry, not curious, but I will challenge you. Because I feel like your setup in your library is probably like omnibus heaven. Without getting up, what would you say are give me two? Give me two. What are two of your favorite books on display right now in the immediate area that I can see?
Oh, that you can see. Oh, okay, that makes it a
Well,
little bit
yeah,
harder.
I guess whatever's in frame for you too. I want show me two that you are extremely proud of or like the most.
Starman omnibus editions. Some of
Ooh,
the
nice.
greatest, most underrated
Can
stories
you grab
ever.
one real quick for anyone to or watching via video? You can see this in person.
So these aren't real true omnis, but this is what DC called omnibus over
Hmm.
10 years ago. They're standard size hardcovers, but there were six of them and they finished them out. Oh, this is to
That's a
me
great
it's like
run.
James Robinson's
Great run.
magnum opus. Like if you've not read Starman, it's wonderful. Oh my gosh, Tony Harris
Yeah.
supplying the artwork for half of the books, and it's all about legacy and
Well said.
searching for the person you're supposed to be. And oh my gosh, I can't open that book. That makes me cry. There's some beautiful.
That's a good one.
There are some beautiful moments in there that
Yeah.
I can't talk about without bringing a tear to my eye. And then Berserk, of course, Berserk.
Oh
You're
yeah. I see
lucky
you
all my
got.
good X-Men books are up there. I'm like, oh, I guess
Oh, I
Astonishing is solid too, but Berserk
yeah.
on there.
Those are all the. Can you grab one of those real quick for anyone that hasn't seen? Those are like the nice Dark
Berserk.
Horse. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
these are the deluxe edition. This is my favorite manga of all time,
Hmm.
and Dark Horse finally decided to package something that they think is worth their time and effort into a nice format, and they really took a gamble. I mean, this is a $50 book. Now
Hmm.
you get manga, now if you get collected editions like omnibus, that's nothing. You're like, what are you talking about, man? $50. I
Yeah.
wish
That's
omnis
on the
were that
low
much.
end.
But this is a black and white hardcover edition of a tankobon. Tankobons are cheap. They're anywhere from like $10 to $15.
Hmm.
So they took a gamble with making something like this, and it worked because they believed in the product and they charged $50 for it. And yeah, my favorite manga getting this treatment. Oh my gosh, book of the year that when volume one came out, and I was very blessed that the PR person remembered my name from all those years writing articles, and she's like, "Hey, would you be interested in?" I didn't even let her finish her email. Oh no, it was a phone call. She's like, "Would you be interested in the new
Yes.
Berserk?" I was
Whatever
like,
it
"Yeah."
is. Whatever it is.
Whatever, send it. She was
Yeah.
like, okay. So she said, so I was the very first person on YouTube that got a advanced copy of Volume One. So I have a really good relationship with Dark Horse. They've been
That's
great.
cool.
Even when they couldn't send me anything, I was still making videos because I
Hmm.
like them and I like their product. I have a wonderful relationship with Marvel in that
What do you
sense.
do with what do you do with like because I imagine your office or library is rather large, but I'm sure at some point like storage becomes a problem. Like what do you do with like the excess and overrun stuff that you get?
Well, one of the things that I do is I do give away a lot on my
Oh,
channel.
that's cool.
Um, yeah, I grew up poor, man. We didn't have nothing. Like I didn't have anything growing up when I was a kid. My comics I was just reading at newsstands in Peru in Spanish, and the ones that my uncle would send me.
Hmm.
So I know what it was like growing up with nothing. So I like to surprise people from time to time and sending out a bunch of things. So I get a
That's
lot of
awesome.
review copies, like Marvel sends me or Dark Horse sends me, and other publishers, and I end up like sometimes just giving them away to random commenters, or sometimes we have big giveaways. Like whenever we reach a milestone, that oh my gosh, that's exhausting. Oh, my wife, she's like, "Oh man, the giveaway might come up sometime soon," because you got to keep like we have it's almost like a contest as to like who guesses the right
Hmm.
answer. Then we have to mail away the books, and it just I have a
In
lot of
this
fun with
climate,
it.
look, in this climate, shipping and handling is a lot. Like postal,
Yeah.
this is getting super nerdy, but like postal charges have increased. So yeah, that is coordinating the logistics and then paying for that shipping and handling, especially an
Mm.
omnibus. Whew.
It's not, how do I put this? It's not cheap, but I've been very blessed.
Yeah,
I've been very blessed, and it's my way of paying it forward to this
that's
wonderful
awesome.
community that has helped me get where I am.
That's awesome.
And yeah, we have people that donate things for the giveaway. It's so sweet.
Cool.
People that help out with super chats during the giveaway because they know how much shipping is. It's crazy expensive.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's one of those things that I do love doing, is giving away a bunch of stuff. And when and if I run out of room, that's why we've been saving. Like, this is crazy. Like, we moved finally at the beginning of this year in March. We moved to the new house, and that was in the works for 7 years of saving money. Oh, we found a house. Oh, it didn't work. Like,
Mm.
and now we're here, and I had all this big, like, I'm like, oh, I have a bigger place. Cool. Oh man, I'm running out of room already. Like, even the way that I have it spaced, I still have some ideas for bookshelves, and you get creative, right? Like with your bookshelves, you start putting the K-Laxes, which are these IKEA
Hmm.
bookcases,
Love me
in the
some
middle of the
K-Lexus.
room, and you're like, you can double
Hmm.
side them. So yeah, if I run out of room, I'll push some books to the back,
Look,
never the Starman, and then put some books in the front of them.
I, the IKEA Kallax shelf has single-handedly. I mean, I feel like it has single-handedly saved and benefited so many comic and vinyl collectors. I live and breathe by the Kallax shelf. It's like IKEA. Just you can sponsor my video, for free. Just send me a Kallax shelf and you got it. Um, um,
Yeah, it's crazy. Like one day, maybe IKEA will send me something.
yeah. Omar, I want to go ahead and return the favor. I want to show and share
Yeah.
with you some of my favorite collected editions that I have here in my room that, some I recently picked up, some I've had for a while. And I just want to hear your thoughts, all right? Tell me some
Well,
words
I
that
was
come to
eyeing
mind.
that Weapon X for a while while
Oh,
you were
okay. Actually,
talking.
this is all right, so this is the first one, right? So I recently picked this up still in the wrapper. And for anyone listening, like I said, you might want to go to the YouTube version for this for this visual segment, but I'll try to explain as much as I can. So I picked up the Barry Windsor Smith Wolverine Weapon X oversized. I am a sucker for treasury editions.
Yes.
So I just like they're oversized and they're still soft covers, so there's like they're not so stiff when you read them. But this one is more of a hardcover oversized. And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I'm probably admitting something that might have folks ask to take my Marvel card, but I've never read the Weapon X series by Barry Windsor Smith. So I decided this might be like a good way to get into it.
Oh my gosh, that is like the best way to get into it. It's
Yeah, I'm looking forward
oversized
to it.
artwork. That's the gallery edition. It's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, I'm
That one
looking
is
forward to it.
beautiful. I love that, and I love that story. And the colors pop out. Oh man, it's
Yeah, I
so
can't
good.
wait. Actually, speaking of which, I was on the Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats channel. Shout outs to Eli Schwab.
Hmm.
And someone was talking about that this version, the coloring was much better than, I guess, a previous collected edition or something like it was like the best version of the coloring in a while. So
Oh
that's why I
yeah,
picked it up.
I think
And then,
they definitely used the new masters for it because like
hmm,
it's better than the Omnibus Volume One of Wolverine, even the new
okay.
printing.
So this next one I picked up 2 weeks ago. And it's one of my favorite hardcovers I've picked up in a long time. But the new Penguin Random House Black Panther
Yeah,
collected edition. It's a Penguin Classics Marvel collection. So it collects the first couple. No, I think it collects all of like Panther's Rage. But look at these like the gold pages,
yeah, the gilded pages are beautiful. I
dude.
actually have that and a couple of others I was going to do an overview of,
Yeah,
because some of my fans have been wanting to get a couple, but didn't know how many they were gonna do.
the
They're beautiful
quality.
books.
Yeah, they came out with a Black Panther one, a Spider Man one, and Captain America. All of them collect.
Yep.
I think this Black Panther one collects more of the not recent, but like more of the newer thing. I think the later appearances of Black Panther. The
Hmm.
Captain America and Spider Man were like all the early like Ditko, Stan Lee, and Kirby stuff. But gorgeous books, gorgeous books. Now I'm going to show you the next two I got are two personal favorites. They're older ones, but I thought maybe you might appreciate this.
Is that Wednesday
The
Comics? Yes, I love
Dude, the
that book, man.
oversized Wednesday comic newspaper size collected hardcover.
I am so glad they took a chance and made it that
Dude,
format.
yes, like it was an awesome concept when it first came
Mhm.
out. Like going to the shop to literally buy, like newspaper, a newspaper comic book, and then for them to put it together and just take the risk of, hey, we're just gonna make it oversized and see who bites. I was one of them. Now, this next one, I think you'd appreciate because this is a little bit of a DIY project that I did, and this is a Fantastic Four by Jonathan Hickman. This is a self-binded book that I
Nice.
did.
So you have some custom stuff. Nice, man. I'm so
Yeah,
proud of
yeah.
you.
So this was when and you could probably relate, but when the Jonathan Hickman Fantastic Four Volume One omnibus was sold out for years, right? Like you just
Yeah.
could not find it. I had all the issues, and I really wanted one, so I just got it. I went ahead and got my own made. So that's one of my prized possessions on my
So
collection.
I was big into the custom omnis, like making my own. I love doing it. I love making my own like covers, dust jackets, table of contents, end
Hmm.
sheet. Like then I realized, don't have the time to do it anymore. And on top of that, Marvel has already printed most of the ones that I worked on. Like I was showing David Gabriel like my Excalibur ones. I'm like, look,
Hmm.
these are now obsolete because you got us like legit Excalibur. Because I was like, what's the book that they're never gonna print? And I'm like, and I wanted to work on an X book, and I said Excalibur. No way did
Hmm.
they ever give us an Excalibur omnibus.
Got it.
I was wrong.
So I want to ask you I want to ask one more question about collected editions. Then I want to hear about the mentees and the community that you've built. But in another recent video from this week, you had one all about your most anticipated collected editions coming out for the rest of 2022. And the thing I liked about that video, and really a majority of your videos, is that there's a lot of diversity in the books and the publishers that you cover and spotlight. In this particular video, you listed some really awesome looking books, a lot of mainstream titles that are coming to collected edition format. You had things like Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man Artist Edition on that list.
It's beautiful
A
looking.
few of the new Warriors omnibuses. There was a Batman No Man's really nice omnibus, a TMNT compendium, a Lynn Wein and Bernie Wrightson Swamp Thing hardcover as well. But in addition to like the popular and American comics and whatnot, you even had some European comics and manga that you showed a little bit of love, like Black Sad, They All Fall Down, which I love Black Sad. I was happy to
Yeah.
see that on the list. And then you had one, a manga that really caught my eye, and I actually wrote that down to check out, but it was the
Oh,
Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service.
yeah. So
So, no, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say I'm just so happy that it's actually coming. I've been waiting years for that thing.
Yeah,
Um,
I have no idea what it is, but the cover and what you said about it hooked me. So I'm going to check that out as soon as it comes out. But I bring up all of that to say, out of all the collected editions that have come out this year, which one, or maybe two, you don't got to just pick one, but which one would you say is a contender for best collected edition in regard to all the things that you pay attention to, right? Like as far as collected material, packaging, quality, and all that. What do you think is like a contender so far for best collected edition?
Ooh, that's okay. So every year I try to do, yeah, every year. No, I do my favorite collected editions.
Oh,
It's
cool.
different than my favorite reads. I separate them. I do them like back to back. I
Yeah.
talk about my favorite collected editions and then my favorite reads the very next day. Favorite collected editions is a lot of fun to put together because I get to pick out books that I'm like, I can't believe this came out. Look at this beautiful format it's in. Um, and it varies all the freaking time. I
Hmm.
don't know, man. I really like that Weapon X Gallery edition. That thing is awesome.
Awesome.
But I also like the Question. Question is one of my most wanted, very underrated character that they actually did. Now, if we can get a
Hmm.
volume two, that would be great. Um, but then we've had a lot of great independent books released in oversized hardcover format. Image Comics has been publishing one. The one I'm really waiting on is Seven to Eternity. I can't wait to get that in
Yeah,
oversized
yeah,
hardcover
I've seen
format.
that on the list. That piqued my interest.
I'm a big fan of Rick Remender's. Like we just got Deadly Class Volume 3 this earlier this year, so
Hmm.
that was another good one. Last year, if I had to pick one, it definitely would have been the Scrooge McDuck book, Life and Times of Scrooge McDuck. I think it's beautiful. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh! So I don't know. This year, it's there were a lot, but maybe Parker.
Hmm. That's a good
Parker's a,
choice. I
Parker's
love
up
some
there.
good Park, man. rest in peace to Darwin Cook. Like some amazing stuff he did.
And it's the last Darwin Cook word. I mean, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay,
So Darwin probably.
that
Yeah,
was a
Darwin
good.
Cook's Parker.
Awesome. All right, Omar. So, we spent this time, honing in and talking about what you do best, which is, reviewing and talking about collected editions. But another, you know, another thing I respect about what you've built with near mint condition in the community and the minty community is that alongside, the comic reviews and announcements that you excel at, one of near mint condition's top priorities, which, you make it apparent, you advertise that one of the top priorities is to also cultivate a community. And I think it's safe to assume, you've been fairly, if not highly successful in doing so, judging from the support you get on your channel. I was on the live, you had, there's a lot of people interacting, not just like viewing, but actually engaging and talking with you. And then even like responses that I got from the mentees communities, from the mentees on other platforms and comic forums, like people were speaking very highly of you and sharing your page. And, when people would recommend on like Reddit, hey, what are some comic YouTube? Like your name was among them. And I was curious to hear, in your opinion, can you contribute this success to anything specifically you've done or that the channel provides? Like what are some conscious things that you've done to ensure that success in that regard?
Oh, this is such a hard question to answer. Not because it's a hard question, but I like to talk a lot, as you could probably tell. 'Cause I don't. I think we were supposed to do this for an hour, and my wife texted me, "Hey, you want to get lunch?" And I'm like, "Oh gosh." It I it is as you know, like putting yourself out there, um, is very difficult sometimes because it's you, right?
Hmm.
Like to put yourself out there, and once you start building a community of people that follow you first, enjoy talking to you, and email you, and Instagram message you, Twitter you, Facebook message you, um, you start seeing it grow and grow. And one of my favorite things I used to do was reply back to every comment, and
Hmm.
that's really difficult to do these days.
Oh yeah, that's a
Man,
lot of
that's a lot to
dedication.
do with me though, because I put out a video every day. So I tried to keep up with that, but it's just almost near impossible. So I've always tried to keep a positive outlook on things and try to make it seem like it's a welcoming place. The thing I hated about working at a comic book store, which is the greatest job I've ever had, was having a coworker that, I know this term because my co-host Wonder Maddie Houston on me. She was like, "You need to stop gatekeeping," because I love gatekeeping her,
Hmm.
for fun. And yeah, so he would, make people feel bad, like make people feel like it was a stupid question they were asking. And people will apologize sometimes on my Saturday stream, like, "I'm sorry if this has already been asked. I'm sorry if you've answered this 1,000 times. I'm sorry if this is a stupid question." And I try to make it that it's not. And I hope that that catches onto the community that are also helping me answer questions, right? Like, it's not a stupid question. It's not. So even if I've answered it before, this is your first time tuning in. So it's almost like that mentality of like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's, like every issue is everybody's, or is somebody's
Well
first
said.
issue,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So they could have been just they could have gotten an omnibus last week and they have no idea where to go from there. So they ask questions. So I like to think that building that kind of community and that kind of positive atmosphere has caught on, and it's been wonderful, man. Like people people have been great. They helped out the channel so much, and yeah, it's a, like I said, it's been a blessing, and my wife has helped a lot with that too. We have a Discord server that kind of manages, like, a lot of people have volunteered to help manage it, and I don't. I'm an old man, dude. I was trying to figure out Discord, and I couldn't log in, and my wife was like, "Maybe that's a godsend. Like, maybe
Yeah.
you shouldn't be, because then that'd be another place you're gonna be or you're gonna be asked questions." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Okay." I try to get in there at least. But even in there, I get told that the community is nice. She keeps an eye on it from time to time, and it's a nice welcoming community, and I think that's a good legacy to have, right? That it shows future generations that it is a welcoming place. That comics isn't just a place to get lost. Like, oh my gosh, where do I start this? Because there are always people willing to help and lead you in the right direction.
Yeah.
And recommendations. People who have on the channel have, like whenever we do a live stream, people ask questions like, "Where do you recommend this?" Fantasy novels. People will chime in with their own thoughts. Right? I love that. I think it's great.
Yeah, you are a prime example of, we are all, we are all not, there is more nice people in comic books, than, what some people may think of, like, a genre filled with a bunch of comic shop guys, from Simpsons, right? I think like that is such a stereotype. It's a funny stereotype and a funny character, because like we've all met our fair share of comic book guys,
Yes.
in shops. And I think, I mentioned early on, or in the intro, that you are one of the most positive voices out there in comics, because you carry that, the way you carry yourself and your viewpoints. Like, I always feel like you are constantly trying to show people and share with people the magic of comic books, right? Like that spark of happiness that we as adults have carried on since childhood. Like, falling in love with comics as a kid, there was that certain kind of like magic to it. Like, yeah, I'm sure you're right there with me. Like, you won't ever forget your first comic book, or the first time you went into a shop, and like we were talking about earlier, like finding those key issues. Like,
Yeah.
there's a certain magic to it that we've carried on well into our adulthood. And I will say that about you, is that you still have maintained that spark and that joy, and I love that you share that with your community, and you're always on the more positive side. And it's so easy, when you look at like Reddit forums or just online forums in general, to see like the negativity get the
Oh,
spotlight or get like
brother.
talked about most.
And and that's something that like I I say this, like it would be so much easier, and there would definitely be a lot more money if you could be negative, if I
Yeah,
could be negative.
controversy
But
sells
it's
sometimes.
really hard for me because it's not like, even when I don't agree with certain writers on things, like I try to give it a positive spin because I could, like, that's somebody's favorite writer, that's somebody's favorite
Hmm.
story. Now, but I am honest with when I talk about things, like when people are like, what are your least favorite X-Men runs? Right off the bat, I'm like, bam, bam, bam. Now, would I still buy that omnibus? You damn right I would. Um,
Especially if
but
it sets me for free, you
but you're
damn
right.
right I
It's
would.
so much easier to be negative about things. Like,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
didn't know the future of DC Comics, and everybody was like making videos like the failure of DC. DC
Hmm.
is ending next month. DC, like, all these speculations about just the negativity of things. This is why Marvel is failing. This is why DC is failing us.
Hmm.
Like, you see it everywhere, and to me it feels like, yeah, I don't know, maybe that some of those people are being genuine, but then it's like it is easy to cash in on that stuff. You see the success of the negativity, and you've always seen it all our lives, man. You go to a
Hmm.
grocery store, and what's like the tabloids are all there and those are some of the best selling magazines. You want to see somebody fail. You want to see somebody cheat on somebody. You want to see somebody get caught cheating or stealing, whatever it is. You want to see I don't know, it's in our human nature or something maybe. The fall of people. Like, you want to see
Hmm.
them fail, and it sucks. Because yeah, you see, I know you've seen videos and, like you said, Reddit forums of these popular topics that seem to be just nothing but negativity, not finding
Yeah.
anything good and positive to say. So sometimes it can be hard to stay positive when you're surrounded by it, and then you get asked a question, like on the Saturday stream, like, hey, why haven't you brought this up? Like, why haven't you brought up? I can't remember. There was one specifically asking about, like, it was copyrights or something. Something, maybe it was a Conan. People were like cashing in on the Conan thing, like, oh, Conan's leaving Marvel because Marvel didn't want to pay. Conan's
Hmm.
leaving Marvel because Titan paid more money. Like, people that just claim to know, like, nobody knows. And that was my thing. I said I'm not gonna make a video unless I know. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not. I don't. I try not to make speculation like videos. Like, that's not me. I'm not. I need to know firsthand exactly what's going on if I am to make a video on set topic. And I just don't. Everything is hearsay, and everybody can make assumptions about people's failures or companies failing. You know, like
Yeah.
my favorite one that, oh, this one gets on my nerves, and this is sarcasm. But the one that I get asked is like, Omar, why is manga outselling comics? And it's like, is there has there been like a big boom of videos of people talking about manga outselling comics? Because that's always been the case since the early aughts. It's nothing new. I'm like, but
Yeah.
do those people in those videos realize how much those mangaka create, like the mangaka, like the creators of these books, how much are being paid, or what the titles of these books are, like what like the top selling books are? Come on, man.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
I see that. I see that floating around a lot, and a lot
yeah.
of times I think for some folks just stick to that headline, right? Like it's easier just to read a headline and go from that. But then when if you've actually read any of the articles or really like good deep dives, you understand it's a very nuanced topic, and there's a lot of factors at play
Oh,
that make
absolutely.
manga much different than American comics. But I get your point, and I'm glad that you continue to focus on the positive and really kind of like dismiss negative things that's going to take like your energy, right? Like it's already a lot of energy putting that you put into creating content, and it's like, do I really want to spend my time focusing on negative things, for an hour? Like, is that the image or the messaging I want to portray? Like, no, you seem like someone that's like, I want to spend my energy on positivity, spreading that, and I think that's a great thing. I wanted
Thanks,
to,
man. I will say one
yeah,
more thing on it.
yeah,
It eh, how do I word this? I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen to creators that start their own channel and
hmm,
start with the negativity. And it sucks because some of those creators have been on my channel before and we never talked about anything like that. We were all
hmm.
cool talking about just different things. And then I see some of the topics they've gone on and done, and I'm like, oh man, is that really you? I know it sells, but is that really what you think?
Yeah, yeah. It's like
And,
a
and,
so
and, and then it's like, is everything wrestling? Is all life wrestling? Is nothing real?
yeah. You're like, yo, is this a yeah? Is everyone in full costume? Does everyone have like this mask on? Like who why won't people just show their real selves? Right? I got you. Omar, sticking on the topic of the mentee community, you mentioned in that same video I brought up the most anticipated collected editions for the rest of 2022. You mentioned that you and the mentees community, and I love that you gave them credit too, that you guys were maybe possibly partially responsible for helping get a new Warriors Volume 2 omnibus released because of the impact you guys had because of the impact you guys had on getting Volume 1 reprinted. And I wanted to ask, can you name other instances where you and the mentees, whether it be being vocal or taking action, were able to leverage your platform to get a series or out of print book revived?
I am very humble in the part that I get to play in, in a lot of this. My wife was bragging about me today, but because I don't like boasting about these things. It's weird. Maybe it's that. What did you call it again? Brown pride. I don't know. I
Yeah,
don't
brown people
because
pride.
I can't. I've actually been told like by a fellow YouTuber that I did a collab on. He was like, "Why don't you just do this, man? You should be like every thumbnail. Be like, guess what? I help Marvel." And I'm like, "Because that's not me. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, to me, it's like about getting the end product to the people that want to read it. And I think that, if anything, that will be my legacy. I get to play a small role.
Hmm.
But there have been several books that, especially with like Marvel and I have a wonderful, wonderful relationship. Um, I suggest maybe adding books to a certain title. Um, One of my favorite ones is the Excalibur Volume 1. When that was originally sent to me, like a list, I get a list from David before I announce him. I think it was called the Excalibur by Chris Claremont and Alan Davis, and it was just their story skipping a bunch of issues. And I said, that was the very first time. I said, I respect, everything you guys want to do. It's at the end of the day, it's your decision. I said, but I think we live in a time now where a volume one would sell just as many copies, if not more, than a Chris Claremont, Alan Davis Excalibur omnibus, because there's a hope for a volume two.
Hmm.
And immediately because I remember I was so scared to send that email, and my wife was like, "Do it." Part of the reason why he reached out to you is because you guys, he had a good vibe on the phone about like suggesting things,
Yeah.
and he emailed me right away. This is David Gabriel. He's the vice senior vice president of sales and marketing at Marvel, and he was like, "Yeah, you're right. I agree." And I will never forget that. Like I'm like,
That's awesome.
that was a win. And then we got Wolverine reprinted. We got that was a funny kind of, not like a bet, but it was kind of like a funny bet. He was like, I don't know if we want to reprint that book because I said, what, Wolverine is like your best selling character. How is it that we don't have an omnibus? And he was like, that first one didn't sell that well. And I said, that was 10 years ago. But if you reprint it now, I said, if it sells enough,
Hmm.
how about we make a deal? We get a volume two. If it doesn't sell enough, I'll send you $50. And he was like, yeah, all right. Dude, that thing sold like hotcakes because now we got a volume
That's
three.
what I'm
So,
talking about, dude. Like you are doing such good work, dude, and having and being able to say that you have, humbly being able to say that you have an impact on the medium, that we all love, in a very niche way too, right? Like collected editions, and being able to say that your platform and your voice has a whatever small or large, has an impact on not only the medium but also the community is what I'll say too. Like that's awesome. Whether whether the channel freaking skyrockets or wherever it goes, I gotta say, man, like I'm very impressed with what you've been able to accomplish and do with the channel, with your community, dude. That's like you really show that it's not all about the stats or the glamour and the lights. Like I love that you've kind of honed in on what you do really good, and that's awesome. Like I've been doing this for like 10 years, and I would love to be able to to have that kind of ability to make that change. Not only just to spotlight the industry, but also to have a positive change. I think is awesome, dude. So kudos to you.
oh, dude, thank you so much. Because honestly, like everybody else that has a bad day at work, there's bad
Mhm.
weeks and months you have, and you forget what it's all about until you take a step back, or you have a wonderful person on the other end of this asking you questions that make you remember. Damn, it's so amazing. Like
Yeah.
having, like, I do a reprint poll for Marvel and like for their Omnis and their Epic collections that my viewers get to vote on. So it's not like books I want printed, it's books they want printed.
Yeah.
And that's
I,
such an amazing feeling that they actually do that. Like, what other company does that? What other company
yeah.
sends out a poll so the fans can be like, I don't know. I collect toys, video games, and anime, but I can't imagine another company that actually takes the voice of their fan base and gives them like, well, here's the book that you wanted. There's not like a here's the toy you wanted. So it's very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think evidence shows that what you're doing with your channel and your community shows that you are both that you're really tapped in, and then it makes sense that they would want to like partner with you and get get a voice that's boots on the ground with their desired customers and their desired audience. So keep up the good
Right,
work.
it's free market research for them, right?
Yeah.
Smart.
It's not
Uh,
all it's not all altruistic, but it is
right,
cool
right.
that they are somewhat tapped into a channel like yours that's doing good work, and that is honest. I think there's something to be said that a large corporation like that doesn't necessarily like that could just put out what they wanted is taking the time and your voice and as well as the community's voice into account, and taking those risks that maybe don't make sense when they're looking at their stats and numbers. Like, to take that risk of like, well, Omar is telling us that, his community wants it. So I know that's not what shows in the market research, but let's take the guy's word for it. And then for it to be successful is come on, man. That's a hell of a story.
It really is amazing because I
Yeah.
mean he really, I mean, yeah, he really took a gamble when I said, yeah, man, if you reprint Daredevil by Bendis and what was the other book, Annihilation, those books would sell. And he was like, I don't, okay. And then he emailed me. That was our first
Yeah.
phone call, and then he emailed me going, okay, we're gonna reprint those. And I said, can I announce them? And he was like, sure. And that's kind of like that got
Yeah.
started.
That,
It's been a hell of a ride, and scary downs but wonderful ups, and it's the best damn thing I've ever done.
I love it. I love it. And speaking about, the rewards of making content centered around comics, I think, being able to, I know personally speaking, being able to meet some of my favorite writers and artists, and have a chat with them and pick their brain is among my favorite reasons why I still do podcasting for so long.
Mhm.
But you're also no stranger to that as well. You know, you've interviewed some rather big names in the industry, like on the retailer side, right? Like you've interviewed and chatted with CEO of Diamond, Steve Geppi, and then
Oh
you've
yeah.
had interviews with creators like Garth Ennis, and Mark Bagley. What's it been like getting to talk with big players in the industry on both sides, right? You've got the business side and artistic side of things. Like, what have you gleaned from these conversations and these interactions that have maybe given you a new insight into the inner workings of the industry that a casual or a regular fan wouldn't quite get?
That it's a lot more difficult than let's go back to print with that book. Like seriously, if I had not
Hmm.
known about the inner workings of these things, or where people ask me my personal opinion about a certain crowdfunding project that's going on, and I see, how do I put this, excuses for giving the customers a smaller version of what they're all asking for. I'm like, well, no, that's not the way it works. They could actually make this happen because I've seen it like at smaller publishers.
Hmm.
So it's kind of opened my eyes as to what's possible and what isn't. And of course, there are a lot of things that it's not as easy as like, can't Marvel just print these at another place? Can't DC do better with their books? Because there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. I mean, DC's working on a skeleton crew. Marvel has contracts, and there are things that are above a lot of people, that are working in said departments, like above their pay scales, I guess, if you will.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. I came across in my research, I came across this, speaking about online forums and your community going to bat. Uh, I came across this Reddit page or forum discussion on the subreddit collected edition. It was, I think, omnibuses or collected editions,
Hmm.
and I believe the person that was someone had shared an interview with you, and I can't remember the name of the podcast. I'm so sorry, but they had asked you about, you know, in a respectful way at that. Why do you lean more? Why do you put so much spotlight on Marvel and why and not on like DC? And I think they meant to say in a fun way. And
Oh,
someone had shared. Like typed up the transcript for it, and it was essentially you telling a very interesting behind the scenes look of like DC, whoever handles like their collected editions, just didn't seem as I guess in tune, maybe open to the idea, or didn't really understand like YouTube and being able to leverage them. And you compared it to like David over at Marvel, who's very in tune, open to your suggestions, like willingly asks you like here's what we got coming up. What do you think? And I thought that was a cool insight into like, oh, it's not just because he loves Marvel properties, but it's literally like the business side of things getting in the way. Like he's dealing with this group that it just isn't in tune with what you do and the power you have and how in touch you are with the community. I thought that was a pretty interesting insight into what I read.
yeah, and it's still actually it's gotten a lot worse than that.
Hmm.
The it, yeah, and it's not for lack of trying. I love DC, but DC also only prints a third of what Marvel prints, and
Oh yeah.
I still do overviews on DC books. I do get that question, like, why aren't you showing DC love? And in a sarcastic way, I always want to say, well, because DC hasn't released a book. Like we're getting one omnibus this month. I don't know how
Hmm.
what love do you want me to do to say? Like, and I have reached out and I have contacts there, and I'm very lucky if I get a reply back every 6 months, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, oh, we're still looking at that, whatever it is. And a lot of it has to do because they lost a lot of people. So it's not
Hmm.
that I'm
Yeah,
hating
that's
on
right.
that.
That's
They're
right.
trying to do what they're trying to keep their heads above water, and hopefully this acquisition by Discovery is going to help that out. I don't know, uh, but yeah, it's a lot
Yeah.
different than the relationship I have with Marvel. It's
And
it's
and
different.
And I brought that up not to bash DC because I know some of our listeners are going to be like, oh, look at Badr using an opportunity to bash DC with his Marvel fandom. I brought that up because that is something that you are privy to, which I think makes your position and your channel unique, is that you've got these relationships from the retail side of things. And that sometimes tends to be a nuanced thing that people overlook because all they see is like, look, my book is either here or isn't. And I thought that was cool that you shared that and kind of gave that insight into it. So
Yeah, I'm
um,
pretty open when it comes to questions. I'm in,
yeah.
like I don't like people bring that up in a joking way.
Hmm.
People like yeah, in a joking manner, like, why don't you show DC love? And I'm like, dude, I'm trying. Give
You're
me a
like,
DC
look,
book. Like, but they are getting better, and I have high hopes that the collected editions keep getting better and better. And
mm,
because I think competition is good. It's never
yep,
like, oh, yeah, people are like, don't you want to see Marvel get the rights back to Transformers and GI Joe? And I'm part. No, they're busy printing their own stuff. The last thing I
yeah,
want is them having the license back and then forgetting about these properties and they sit on it and
yeah.
collecting dust because I
And
mean there's a lot of properties that a lot of these companies own that nothing's done with.
and let's be real, IDW is I believe they still got Transformers, right? Like IDW. Oh
But
no,
till the end of the year and then that's it.
okay, got it. Well, then my point will still stand. IDW has been doing fantastic when it
Yes.
comes to handling like properties like that, TMNT. Like I am a okay with IDW, keeping that. Well, sounds like it won't be, but
Yeah,
showing
it's a
because they've
bummer.
got the time to show like love, right? To like
Hmm.
really do things with that. Because you're right, Marvel's got a library full of
I mean,
characters
we
just
get
in Marvel comics.
printing Transformers over X-Men. Do you know how many people are going to start yelling at
Yeah,
me?
and your wildest dreams. Yeah. All right, Omar, I'm gonna move on to one of my favorite questions to ask on this show, especially when I have a great guest like yourself on, and that is, and this is more so helpful to aspiring creators that are tuning in, people that want to do the same things as our guest. In your case, if you were to give advice to an aspiring content creator or YouTuber that's listening right now, based on something you wish you would have known prior or early on in your YouTube journey, what would you say?
So if I could go back in time and tell myself,
Right
try
before you
this.
you went full time, or maybe when you first started, if you could tell yourself a piece of advice that would have made this whole YouTube journey way easier, what would you say?
Get yourself a better microphone. Get yourself a better microphone. Do not use your iPhone built-in microphone. Come on, Omar. No, honestly, things like that really. I'm not kidding. Like a $10 microphone from Walmart plugged into your iPhone, if you're using that as your camera, or if you're using that as your recording device for your podcast, absolutely, that goes
Yeah.
miles. It's all about audio, right? Audio is very important to people. You can have one of the greatest freaking videos, and if they can't hear anything or you talking about said book, whatever,
Well said.
it's not gonna matter, right? People are gonna be like, so yeah, I think go back and tell myself get that. And I always this is the advice I always give people. It's like do it because you love it, do it because there's a passion for it, and you want to have your voice heard. Don't do it
Yeah.
because you're gonna get free books or you think you're gonna get sponsors or you're gonna make millions of dollars on YouTube. I guess I don't know, maybe some people do get lucky that way. Um, do it because you have a true passion for it and you have something to say. What I
Excellent.
always.
Well said. I love that. And I'm gonna add a question to that. If you could go back in time and
Mhm.
do the channel again, let's. What would be another topic that you would devote your time to making the YouTube channel outside of comic books? Is there like another? I know you mentioned like manga and video games you had written about. Like, would you ever do another channel like that? Or if you had the ability to go back in time and redo all this and pick a different topic, what would that be?
Oh man, I like movies. I like
Hmm.
talking about movies. I do it with one of my co-hosts, the amazing Amanda. Have like a movie night on usually on Fridays at 8. It's when we do it. Like we usually review like the TV shows, the comic book centric ones. But I just like movies in general. It's a lot of fun to talk about.
Oh yeah.
As you talk about like a division in between um, whether you like something or not. Like you come into it all objectively, um, but movie seems to tear people apart more than comics. I think sometimes.
Yeah. So
So yeah,
people hold,
maybe movies or I don't know. I do throw in manga in my videos all the time, so I get to talk about manga. Maybe video games. Video games is a lot of fun too.
got it. So I can see it now. Uh, Ebert and Omar. I like that. It's got a ring to it. All right, Omar. This has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so thankful that you've allowed me to talk your ear off for almost 2 hours, and that is after doing a live stream earlier this morning. I can't thank you enough. I will have plenty of links in our channel. I'm sorry. I'll have plenty of links to your channel and socials in the show notes. So I highly encourage everyone listening to check those out and give Omar a follow if you aren't already. Omar, would you like to plug or announce any upcoming projects or videos coming out soon that our listeners should be on the lookout for?
Sure. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure. It's been really fun. That has not felt like 2 hours. So that was 4 hours I've been talking. My goodness. So yeah, my channel's Near Mint Condition. That I put out videos every day, and yeah, I'll be hopefully doing some more interviews coming up. Be really and doing more reading orders and breaking news. People love those. People love
Oh
the
yeah.
upcoming collected editions. It's one of my favorite. It's the hardest video I put together every month. I mean, it's like 18 hours worth of work, but
Whew.
it's the one that people really enjoy. So
Is
I
that
did
the
try to make
average?
it easier on myself. Be like, don't y'all want to see this weekly? So I don't spend that much time working on it. They were like, nah, man, we like
Yeah.
it monthly so we can budget. And I'm like, damn,
Yeah.
okay.
Is that the average amount of time, real quick, that you spend on editing and whatnot? Like, how long does it take to do a regular,
Oh,
on average, how much time does it take to do a video?
um, not long. If it's an overview of something, I just finish reading it. I shoot the video anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half. Editing takes about hour, 2 hours, sometimes three, depending on topic.
Hmm.
But if I'm using overlays or
Yeah.
like if I'm doing my top 20 and I'm using different pictures, and
Hmm.
those take a little bit longer. So I don't know, it could be anywhere from like shooting and editing anywhere from 2 hours to 4, 6 hours. And that's
Got
not
it.
including the time to read and research either.
Hmm.
So,
Well,
but 18 hours is a long time for one video.
yeah. Well,
Luckily, I
Omar,
only do it
I'm
once a month.
Well, Omar, I'm glad that as the end user or that gets to enjoy the product, I will say your videos are great. I love the production and time and focus you put into them, and I want to thank you again for coming on the Short Box podcast, man, and to all the Minty community tuning in. Thank you guys so much for joining us, Omar. I hope this isn't the last time we chat. Hopefully we can get together here soon. But I wish you best of luck with everything you got going on, brother. This was awesome.
Dude, thank you so much for having me on. This was my pleasure.
Hell yeah. All right. Peace, y'all.